Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad, he destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light, he's not a spirit, he has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled master, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, the Hadrami Introduction, Al-Muqaddimah Al-Hadramiyya, written by the Imam Bafadl, rahimahullah. We've made it in the book to page 2. We've made it to page 2 at the top of the page, where the author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, disliked water. So inshallah, you can see the tree that I've put up on the screen showing the rulings of water. We're saying that water can be pure and purifying. It can be pure but not purifying. It can also be impure, which means it's contaminated by najasa. Okay? And we've talked so far about a couple of cases here. We talked about the case where the water is pure and purifying, and it's not disliked to use. This is just plain and simple water. Any water that the word water by itself, without any kind of necessary addition to it, without any kind of necessary qualification on it, if the water can simply be called water, then this water is pure and purifying, and it's not disliked to use. Okay. We also talked about the case where the simple water, the water that's pure and purifying but not disliked, if that water became mixed with some other pure substance to the point that it cannot be called water anymore, meaning its taste, color, or smell changed a lot, in that case, we would say that the water is pure, since no najasa has come into it. But it's not purifying anymore because it's not water anymore. We've talked about those two cases, and alhamdulillah, we've made it to page 2. And in page 2, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, is going to talk about disliked water. Disliked water, he says, may Allah have mercy on him, it is disliked to use water that is extremely hot or extremely cold. Right. So here under water, which is pure and purifying, but disliked to use, we're going to add a few cases. Extremely hot, extremely cold, okay, these are examples of water that's pure and purifying, which means if you use it to make your wudu is valid because you use something that's pure and purifying. However, it's disliked to use. In the case of these two, the water that is extremely hot or extremely cold, the reason why it's disliked to use is because the extreme temperature of the water normally will prevent you from making your wudu in the fullest possible way. For example, if water is extremely hot, you might not wash your face 3 times. You might do it just once. Or you might not take care to make sure the water reached every single place that it needs to reach. You might just do it really fast and not not be careful to make sure the water's gone everywhere. This would be the case if it's very hot or even if it's very cold. So it's disliked to use water that meets that description. What else does he say? He says, may Allah have mercy on him, the same applies to sun-heated water in a hot region, in a forged container, for use on the body, but not for clothes. The dislike ends on cooling. So according to him, may Allah have mercy on him, there's a third type of water which is pure and purifying, but disliked to use. And that is sun-heated water. Sun-heated water. Sun-heated water has a lot of conditions to it. When we say that sun-heated water is disliked to use, and by the way, the strong opinion is that it's not disliked to use sun-heated water. Okay, the strong opinion is that it's not disliked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scratch that out. According to the strong opinion, it is not disliked to make your purification with sun-heated water. But there is an opinion that it's disliked, and the author, may Allah have mercy on him, is mentioning that opinion here. In order for the water to be considered sun-heated, certain conditions have to be met. The first condition is that the water be in a metal container. It be in a container that was forged, meaning it was formed by beating it. You know, while the metal is hot, you bang on it to shape it into the shape that it needs to be. So if you have a metal container that was forged in such a way, that's the first condition. And when we say metal, we're talking about any metal other than gold and silver. Okay, we're not talking about gold and silver because the water would not be considered sun-heated if the container was made of gold or made of silver. But if it's in a container made of a metal that's not gold or silver, that's condition 1. Condition 2 is it's in a hot part of the world. So if you're in a place like Mecca, where the temperatures get very hot, or a place like Arizona, where the temperatures get very hot. Okay, if you're in a hot part of the world and you had water in a metal container, and that metal container was set out in the sun, such that the water in the container became hot due to the influence of the sun, not because something else heated up the water, but it was the sun that heated the water that was in that metal container. Okay, this is called sun-heated water. And if you have sun-heated water, according to this saying, which again is not the strongest saying, according to this saying, it's disliked to use that water on your body, but it would not be disliked to use that water for purification on your clothing. So if you had some filth on your clothing, some najasa on your clothing that you had to wash with water, you could use this kind of sun-heated water to clean your clothes, and it would not be considered disliked, not according to either opinion. But to use it on your body, there's one opinion that says it's disliked to do that, and a strong opinion says it's not disliked. And in any case, it's only disliked while the sun-heated water is hot. If you move that sun-heated water into the shade and left it for a while until it cooled off, it would no longer be disliked, even according to the opinion that says it is disliked to use it. That opinion says it's disliked to use it while it's hot. Are there any questions about this? Just know that according to the strongest opinion, it is not disliked to use this water. No questions? All right, well then we will continue. The next section, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, used water. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, says, purification using little used water isn't correct in lifting spiritual impurity or removal of physical impurity. What does this sentence mean? What he means is your purification, whether it was something that lifts hadath, such as wudu and ghusl, or whether it's something that removes najas, such as istinja and washing najasa, none of these kinds of purification are valid. He uses the word correct, but the proper translation of the word sahih is valid. He's saying it is not valid for those purposes. I'm going to say it again. What's the water which is not valid for those purposes? A small amount of used water. A small amount of used water. So the second type of water which is pure, but it's not purifying, meaning it's not suitable for purification, meaning your purification is not valid if you use it. What's the second type of water that's pure but not purifying? It's a small amount of used water. And what do we mean when we say used water? When we say used water, what we mean is that this water has already been used once to perform some kind of obligatory purification. All right, I'll put it a different way. This water has already been used to either lift hadath, or it's already been used to remove najas. Water that's already been used to lift hadath or remove najas is called used water. And if you have a small amount of it, then this water is not purifying. It's pure, but it's not purifying, so you cannot perform a valid purification with it. However, if you had a large amount of used water, like if you gathered together, every time you made wudu, every time you made ghusl, you gathered the water together in a bucket and kept pouring the buckets into a huge tub that you had. I don't mean like a bathtub. I mean like a big drum of water. If you keep pouring your used water into the drum, well, then once you reach 2 qullas of volume, once the water reaches 2 qullas, which is about 51 gallons, it says here at the bottom of the page that it's about 216 liters. I don't have any confirmation of that particular number. I personally prefer to use the Islamic measurements, 2 qullas. 2 qullas are approximately 51 gallons. So if you keep gathering together your used water and pouring it until you have 2 qullas worth, well, then at that point, the water would switch over and it would be pure and purifying water, because at that point, it's not called used water anymore. At that point, it's just water. Okay, so it's only used water when there's a small amount of it. Once there's a lot of it, it's no longer called used water. At that point, it's simply called water, which means, because it's simply called water, that it goes over into this category over here on the far left, the water that's pure and purifying and not disliked to use. MashaAllah. He says, such that if the one performing wudu puts his hand in little water after washing his face, not intending scooping, the remaining water becomes used. What does that mean? He means, let's say someone's making wudu and he has a bucket of water. He puts his hand in the bucket of water to scoop up some water, and he uses that water to wash his face. Okay? Once he uses the water to wash his face, the water that's on his face and dripping off is now used water. The water that's on his hand is now used water. So when he puts his hand in the bucket to get some more water, he now just put used water into the bucket of pure and purifying water, and they mix. And they mix. So now we need to go back to what we were saying last week. Used water and pure and purifying water seem to be the same. They have the same smell, the same color, the same taste. So when they mix together, we have to estimate how much that used water would have changed the good water. We say if the used water that got off of our hand and into the bucket, if it had been grape juice, would the color of the bucket of water have changed? If so, then that water is not purifying anymore. Or if it had been lathen, would the smell of the bucket of water have changed? If so, it's not purifying anymore. Or if the stuff on my hand had been pomegranate juice, if it had mixed in with the bucket, if that amount that was on my hand had mixed in with the bucket, we would estimate would the taste of the water have changed? If the answer to any one of those three questions is yes, then this water is not purifying anymore. This is a problem, okay? Because you need to scoop into that bucket after each step of the wudu. So there's a risk that every time you scoop, you're going to render the water to be non-purifying. How do you avoid this problem? You avoid this problem with your own intention. You see, when you put your hand into the bucket of water, if it's your intention that you're actually just scooping up water from the bucket, it's not your intention to perform purification. Because if it's your intention to perform purification by sticking the water in there, remember, after you wash your face, the next thing that you have to wash is your hands. So if it's your intention when you put your hand in the bucket that you're actually going to remove hadath from your hand, then what does that mean? It means the whole bucket now has been used water, because you use the water in that bucket to clean to lift hadath from your hand. It's very important if you're making wudu from a container like a bucket or a pot, that you have the intention of just scooping up water when you put your hand in it. That it's not your intention to actually lift hadath. That way you're not using the water in the bucket for purification. Rather, you're taking water out of the bucket, and then once it's out of the bucket and in your hand, then you will use the part in your hand for purification. This is an important fact. And, alhamdulillah, the author added that. He said, not intending scooping. He made that very clear, because if it's your intention just to scoop water, then you don't need to worry about the status of the water in the bucket. Okay, that's what we call, it's la yadur. It doesn't harm the ruling of the water, the fact that you're scooping water, that you're putting your hand in the water in order to scoop. It would only affect if you put your hand in there with some other intention. It says using used water in a recommended purification, such as the second and third washes, is fine. Give me a second to look something up here, because I'm pretty sure the author did not actually say is fine. Yeah, the author originally said, if this were a more direct translation, it would say, using used water in a recommended purification, such as the second and third washes, is valid. Okay, your purification is valid if you use used water for that purpose, meaning the used water is not actually lifting any hadath nor removing any najis. Let's do an example. When you wash your face, when you make wudu, how many times do you wash your face? You wash your face 3 times. The first wash of the face is the wash that removes the hadath from the face. The second wash is not removing any hadath because it was already removed by the first wash. And the third wash also is not removing any hadath because it was already removed by the first wash. So the second time you wash your face and the third time you wash your face, which by the way are not obligatory to do, they are recommended for you to do. These washes, which are recommended, like the second and third wash, if you do those washes with used water, this is valid because the used water, as we said, is pure but not purifying. So it doesn't lift hadath. It doesn't remove najis. But for the second and third wash, you don't need it to lift hadath because the hadath has already been lifted. Inshallah, that's clear. Again, if you have questions, drop them in the box to make sure that I see it and I can answer it. Let's keep going. It says, concessions for water. All right. So we're talking now about things that make water impure. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the last 2 sections. Water will become impure if it's a small amount, meaning less than 2 qullas, and najasa came into contact with it. This, if that occurs, then the ruling of that water is that that water is impure. It's contaminated. Contaminated what? By najasa. And if it's a large amount, meaning 2 qullas or more, so you should understand from the way it's worded here that if the amount of water was exactly 2 qullas, this counts as a large amount. When we say a small amount, we mean something less than 2 qullas. And when we say a large amount, we mean 2 qullas or more. Okay? If you have a large amount of water and najasa came into contact with it, and the taste, color, or smell of the water changed slightly. Changed what? Slightly. There's a difference between this case over here and this case over here. These cases over here, this water is najis filthy. Okay, when we're talking about something najis touching the water, like if urine touched the water, or feces touched the water, or vomit touched the water, or blood touched the water, or some kind of alcoholic beverage touched the water, for example, or if haram meat touched the water, if it was a small amount of water, that water is automatically contaminated. We don't even ask ourselves whether the color, taste, or smell changed. That water is contaminated by mere contact. But if you had a large amount of water, 2 qullas or more, mere contact with najasa by itself does not contaminate the water. It only gets contaminated if that water changed. Okay, the taste of the water had to change slightly, or the color of the water had to change slightly, or the smell of the water had to change slightly. How big of a change? The tiniest change that's noticeable. If it changed enough that you noticed the taste changed a tiny bit, or the smell or the color changed a tiny bit, then that change means this water is now contaminated. Okay, and it's no longer suitable for purification. In order for a large amount of water to be contaminated, all that's required is a tiny change. However, last week when we were talking about a pure substance, not something najas, but if a pure substance mixed in with the water, a tiny change doesn't do anything. Okay, it will remain pure and purifying if there's only a tiny change. It will only stop being purifying if the water changed a lot. That's why here it says a lot in bold print. Okay, matter of fact, let's make it bigger. If the water changed a lot, then the water stops being purifying. Over here, we said if the water changed what? Slightly. Okay, this is the rule. So if you understand all of this, you'll understand what the author is saying, that at times water is pure and purifying. In that case, it could either be disliked or not disliked. Okay, the not disliked water is just plain water. The disliked water is if it's extremely hot or extremely cold, and according to one opinion, or if it's sun heated. That's the water that you can use for purification, are those two types. In the middle, you have water that's pure, but not purifying. This water is pure, which means that it's okay to drink it. It means that if it gets on your clothes, it's not going to invalidate your prayer. It's still pure. All right. The only issue with this water is that you can't make wudu with it. You can't make ghusl with it. You can't clean najasa with it. It doesn't purify other things, but in and of itself, it's still pure. This would be like water that's no longer called water because something pure mixed with it and changed it a lot. Or it would be a small amount of used water. This water is still pure, but it's not purifying. And the third ruling here is impure. This would be water that is contaminated by najasa. And in order to know when to apply that rule, you need to ask yourself, how much water was it? If it was a small amount of water, meaning less than 2 qullas, then the water is automatically contaminated the moment any najasa touches it. But if it was a large amount of water, 2 qullas or more, it's only contaminated if the najasa touched it and changed it a tiny bit. If there was no change, then the water remains pure and purifying. That's how najasa works. Now the author, may Allah have mercy on him, he's about to give us some more detail on these issues. He says, may Allah have mercy on him, little water and other liquids. Little water and what? Other liquids become impure by coming into contact with impurities. What does that mean? He's talking about this case here. Right? If you have a small amount of water, then mere contact with najasa contaminates all of that water. But he says also other liquids carry this judgment. Please pay attention closely here. He's saying water and other liquids, liquids that are not water, are different. He's saying they're different. He's saying in the case of water, we draw a distinction between when there's a small amount, which he calls little water, and when there's a large amount. We draw that distinction for water. And if the water is a small amount, then mere contact with najasa contaminates it. But for every other liquid that's not water, we do not draw a distinction between a small amount and a large amount. Notice he didn't say little water and little amounts of other liquids. He said water, if it's a small amount, and other liquids, no matter how much of it there is, they become impure by mere contact with najasa. So what that means is if you had a humongous, like vat of milk, 900 gallons of milk, and one drop of blood falls into that milk, the whole 900 gallons is contaminated. Even if no change was observed in the milk, it's all contaminated. Why? Because liquids that are not water are treated the same as a small amount of water, no matter how big the amount of that other liquid is. If you had 1,000,000 gallons of vinegar and one drop of urine fell into it, all of that 1,000,000 gallons of vinegar would now be contaminated by najasa. Because liquids that are not water, they follow the rules that we apply to water when it's a small amount. And what is that rule? Mere contact with najasa contaminates all of it. Okay, so that's what he's putting out there in the very beginning. He's saying if you have a small amount of water, or if you have some other kind of liquid, no matter how much of it, it becomes impure, meaning it gets contaminated by coming into contact with impurities, meaning something najis. And he's going to list out for us in a few chapters exactly what those najis things are. All right. Inshallah, we understand. MashaAllah. Someone asked a question. She said, if you get tomato sauce on your white shirt, you wash with soap and pure water. However, the stain is not removed. Is it okay to pray with the shirt on? The answer is yes. You can pray with the shirt on. In fact, even if you never washed it, if you never used soap or water, if you just left the tomato sauce on there, you can still make salat wearing that shirt. Okay, because tomato sauce is not najasa. It's not najis filthy. Okay, let's think back to the definition of purification. The definition of purification is that which lifts hadath, removes najis, or achieves the same aim as them, or has the same appearance as them. These are the things that are purification. Okay? In order for us to make salat, we need to make sure there's no hadath, so we need to lift it. And we need to make sure there's no najis. So if it's there, we need to remove it. Tomato sauce is not hadath and it's not najis. So it's not something that we need to remove in order for our salat to be valid. Okay, it's not something we need to remove. Rather, najasa is the physical thing we need to remove. And najasa, there's a list of 15 things that we're going to get to later in the book that are najasa. It includes things like urine, feces, blood, pus, vomit, dead animals, and things like that. Tomato sauce doesn't fall into that category. Okay, let's go back to the book. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, explained that if you have a small amount of water, it gets contaminated by mere contact with najasa. And that same rule would apply if you had a liquid that's not water, no matter how much of it you had. He then says there are exceptions to this. There are what? Exceptions to this. He's saying there are cases where najasa might come into contact with the water, but we do not deem that water contaminated. There are cases when you might have a small amount of water, and in fact, najasa does touch the water, and despite that, we do not say that the water is contaminated. Okay, what are these exceptions? Number one, that which isn't detected by the eye. Okay, if you have some kind of najis filth that's so small, a person of average vision cannot see it, then that bit of najis filth is excused, it's ignored. What's an example? Let's say that you're outside, out in the dirt somewhere, and there's poop. You go out there and some animal pooped in the grass. And you saw a fly come and land on top of the poop. You saw the fly land on the poop. And then you saw the fly fly off. Now you know, because the fly landed on that poop, that fly has poop on his feet. You know that the fly's feet have poop on it. But you can't see any poop on the fly's feet. Whatever najis filth might be on that fly's feet is so small that you can't see it. And so if that fly then lands on your hand, you will not say, oh no, I now have poop on my hand. You would not say that because you can't see any poop there. If that fly landed in your cup of water and then flew out, you would not say, my cup of water is now contaminated. Because whatever najasa may have touched that water, it was so small that a person of average vision cannot see it. So the najasa that's so small it can't be seen is excused. It's as if it's not even there. Number two, what's another exception to this rule? It says a dead animal which doesn't have flowing blood. Okay, what do we mean when we say a dead animal that doesn't have flowing blood? We mean an animal where if you pull off one of its legs, it will not bleed. That's what we mean by not having flowing blood. We mean if you pulled off a leg, it wouldn't bleed. So, for example, a fly or an ant. Okay, a fly, an ant, a roach. Okay, these kind of animals, if you pull a leg off, they don't bleed. So if an animal like that goes into your container of water and then dies in it, we do not say that the water got contaminated. Okay, the water did not get contaminated by the fact that there's a dead animal in it. Ordinarily, a dead animal is najis filthy. And in fact, that dead insect is najis filthy. It is najis. But because it's the type of animal that doesn't bleed when you pull a leg off, it does not contaminate the water that it died in. Unless, what does it say here? Unless it causes change or is inserted. Okay, so if someone threw that dead animal into the water on purpose, in that case, it contaminates the water because you purposely put it in there. Okay, the exception that where it doesn't contaminate the water is if this happened without your interference. Like sometimes bugs will fly into water and die in there. If you leave a bucket outside, after a while, you're going to have a couple of dead mosquitoes, a couple of dead gnats, a couple of dead flies. Like insects will fly into it and die in there all on their own. If they did it themselves, then their dead bodies do not contaminate the water. But if you picked up a dead fly off the ground and you threw it into your bucket of water, that contaminates the water because you put it there on purpose. That's what it means by inserted. Another case where the body of an insect actually would contaminate the water is if there's so many dead insect bodies in the water that the water changes. The color of the water changed, or the taste of the water changed, or the smell of the water changed because there are so many dead bugs in it. At that point, we would say that the water is contaminated. Okay, but these are rare events. It's rare to have so many bugs that the water changes, and it's rare that a person would intentionally throw a dead bug into the water. Okay, the things that happen normally is that a few bugs die in the water, and this would be excused. Those dead bodies would not contaminate the water. Number 3, it says the mouth of a cat which had become impure. Then it disappeared, where there is a possibility of it drinking from a large container of water. Yes, so, in Muslim towns, we like to have cats around. And these cats, they sometimes eat that which is najis. Like there might be a dead animal in the street, and the cat will go over and eat from that dead animal's body. So when you see the cat eat from that dead animal, you know that the cat's mouth has now been contaminated by that dead animal, which is najis. Okay? And you didn't see the cat rinse its mouth out to clean its mouth. So you know that the ruling of the cat's mouth is that it's contaminated. But then the cat went away. He left. You didn't see where he went. He left somewhere. And then next time you saw him, like some time passed before you saw him again. In this case, you ask yourself, is it possible that while he was out of my sight, that cat drank from a container of water, which is 2 kullahs or more? Or maybe not even a container. Is it possible the cat went and drank from a pond or a lake or a river? Is it possible that the cat put his mouth into water, which is more than 2 kullahs or more? If that's the case, then when you see the cat again, and you see the cat now put its mouth, say, into your bucket of water, you do not judge that the cat contaminated your water. Even though you know this cat's mouth is contaminated, we don't say that it contaminated the water. Why? Because now there's a doubt. There's a doubt as to whether the cat's mouth is contaminated or not. Actually, I shouldn't put it that way. There's a doubt as to whether the water got contaminated or not. Okay, and in the Shafi'i school, we have a rule that which is known for certain is not overturned by that which is doubtful. Okay, so how does that play out in this case? You know the cat's mouth is contaminated because you saw it eating the najis filth. That's something you know for sure. He disappeared for a while and came back. You don't know for sure if he cleaned his mouth. So therefore, what do you conclude? You stick with what you know for sure, which is that the cat's mouth is filthy. But there's a possibility that the cat cleaned its mouth. It's possible that while he's gone, he drank from a lake or something. So then when it comes time to seeing the cat drink out of the bucket, you know that before the cat drank out of the bucket, you know that water was pure and it was not contaminated. You know that for certain. And when the cat drank out of the water, you don't know for certain that the cat contaminated it because the cat was away and out of your sight for a time. And it's possible that the cat's mouth was purified. So there's doubt as to whether the cat contaminated the water. And in cases where there's doubt, what do? You ignore the doubt and you stick to what you know for certain, which is that the water is pure. This is why he says the mouth of a cat, if it became impure and he went away for a while, such that it's possible he drank from a large amount of water and then he returned, then we say he doesn't contaminate whatever else his mouth may touch after that. Number 4, He says, excuse me. Number 4, it says, a child who became impure, then disappeared, and his purification is possible. So for like a baby, we say the same thing that we would say about a cat. Okay, if you saw a baby, the baby's mouth became impure. Like say the baby vomited. So now you know the baby's mouth is impure. And the baby went out of your view. The baby went into, I don't know, you're at the park. The baby went over there where the pond is. And then the baby came back. Is it possible that while the baby was gone, the baby drank out of a large amount of water? If so, then whatever the baby puts his mouth on after that, we conclude that it is not contaminated for the same reason that we conclude that the cat that went away and came back does not contaminate whatever he puts his mouth on after. Someone asked about the water in the bucket. She said that water is contaminated. That is why the cat drank your water from the bucket. Is this correct? This is not what I said. I said the cat ate something najas, like eating from a dead animal, an animal carcass. Then the cat disappeared, and it's possible that the cat drank from a large amount of water while he was gone. Like there's a river nearby, or a stream nearby, or a pond nearby. It's possible the cat drank from it, and now the cat's mouth is pure. This is possible. So when the cat returns, if you see the cat put his mouth on something, like if the cat licked your hand, you would not say, oh no, now my hand is contaminated. You would not say that. Okay, the cat's mouth, you believe the cat's mouth is contaminated, but you have a doubt about whether the cat's mouth contaminates you. And because of that doubt, you ignore the possibility of contamination and you stick with what you know for certain, which is that your hand is pure, because you knew for sure your hand was pure before the cat licked it. This is what we're talking about. So now, instead of licking your hand, let's say the cat drank out of a bucket of water. Same thing. You believe the cat's mouth is contaminated. That's what you believe. Okay, but you know that it's possible the cat's mouth is not contaminated. All right? You don't know for certain that the cat's mouth is contaminated. You believe it's contaminated because you saw him contaminate it for certain, and you never saw him clean it. But you know it's possible that he cleaned it. Like while the cat was gone, it's possible that the cat drank from a large amount of water and that the cat's mouth is now clean. It's possible. So then when the cat returns, if he drinks out of your bucket of water, we do not say that the water in the bucket is now contaminated. Why do we not say that? Because we don't know for sure that the cat's mouth is contaminated. We don't know that for sure. But we do know for sure that the water in the bucket was pure before the cat drank it. So the ruling of the water, for sure, it was pure. And when the cat drank it, we do not know for sure that the water got contaminated. And in these cases where there's doubt about one thing and certainty about another thing, we stick to what's known for certain. It was known for certain the water was pure. It's doubtful whether the water was contaminated, so we ignore the doubt and stick to what was known for certain. Inshallah, that's clear. It means you can use the water in that bucket to make your wudu. That's what it means. Number 5. It says a small amount of smoke from an impurity. A small amount of smoke from an impurity. When they say smoke, they mean like you're burning it. In the past, one of the things that people used to burn for fuel is feces, poop. Like if an animal pooped, you gather together that poop and burn it for fire. And the smoke that comes away from the najis filth that's being burnt, if a little bit of that smoke gets on you, do we say, oh no, you're contaminated because the smoke passed across your body? No, we don't say that. If it's a small amount of smoke, we say it did not contaminate whatever it touched. If you had a bucket of water and some smoke, say the wind blew some smoke away from that poop fire and the smoke blew over top of your bucket of water such that the smoke touched the water a tiny bit, we would not say that the water in your bucket has been contaminated. We would not say that because it was a small amount of smoke that touched the water. Number 6, insignificant amounts of impure hair. MashaAllah. So when we say insignificant amounts of hair, we're talking about hair from an animal, like a cat. Say you have a pet cat. You know, there's a certain time of year when cats shed fur. So if you have a cat in your house, you'll know that in the springtime, you start seeing hair around the house. And if you have hair around the house, then you might end up having a few hairs on your body or on your clothes. Well, those hairs are najis. Those hairs are najis filthy. And the rule in the Shafi'i school is that if you have any najis filth on your body or on your clothes, then your salat is invalid. But the exception is if it's hairs from an animal like a cat or a donkey or a horse, a camel. If hairs like that are excused, they won't invalidate your salat as long as it's a small amount. What do we mean by a small amount? We mean an amount that's about the size of a quarter. Okay, if the hairs that are on your body, if you were to put them all together, it'd be smaller than a quarter. Well, then it is excused. It won't invalidate your salat. Now, the place, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, listed this here in a list of things that appear to be exceptions to the rule about contaminating water. But for this particular one, the one about impure hair, I was taught it not in the context of water, but in the context of your body and your clothing and the ground. That which is touching you or your clothes while you're in salat, if it's a small amount of hair, it's excused. As for in the water, I don't recall learning this in the context of water, even though the author here lists it in that context. This is not the context that I was taught hair is an exception for. Last one, number 7, it says an insignificant amount of manure dust. Nor does the dust of manure cause impurity to one's moist limbs. So just like we said in the past, they would sometimes burn poop as a fuel for fire. Another thing that sometimes happens is poop that's out there on the ground, it'll dry out. Like if it's out there in the sun, it'll get dry and eventually it'll crumble, or it might even turn to dust. And so if someone comes by and kicks the poop, it'll kick up a lot of poop dust into the air. If you live on a dirt road, a car might drive down a dirt road, kicking up a whole lot of dust behind it. And some parts of that road might have animal poop on it, right? If your dirt road goes near a farm, there could be all kinds of animal poop on that dirt road. And when the car drives by, kicking up all that dust, some of that dust is dust from najasa, dust from manure. So the author, may Allah have mercy on him, he's saying that if dust from manure blows through the air, it also will not contaminate the water that it blows over, and it will not contaminate you, even if your skin is moist. Like say you've been sweating, or say you just finished making a wudu and your skin is still wet. Even if that poop dust blows across your body while your limbs are wet, this will not contaminate your limbs. These are all what? Exceptions. These are exceptions to the rules of najasa contaminating things. We'll stop here, inshallah, and next week we'll pick up with the case when the water is 2 khulas or more. This case over here, we haven't read this part from the book yet. We'll get there, inshallah, next week. In the meantime, I will scroll through the questions and answer them before I go, inshallah ta'ala. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah to those who salamed me. Okay, someone's asking about the laundry machine. It's true that normally you add detergent to the water, and therefore the water is not the water is not pure and purifying. It's been changed by the soap. That's true. But there's another issue that comes up when it comes to the washing machine. And that is that, how do I say this? If you have a small amount of water, the moment najasa touches that water, the water is contaminated. So if you're trying to clean clothing with a small amount of water, it's absolutely vital that you pour the water onto the najasa, not the other way around. If you had a shirt with, say, a spot of blood on it, you don't take the shirt and dip it into the bucket of water to wash it. If you dip that spot of blood into the water, it contaminates the water. So then every part of the shirt that got wet by the water will now be contaminated. You don't want to put the najasa into the water. It needs to be the other way around. You need to pour the water onto the najasa. That's how you purify it when you're using a small amount of water. And the way washing machines work is the water builds up in the bottom of the machine. So if you have najasa in there, it's going to end up contaminating the water. And instead of cleaning your garment that had najasa on it, what you're going to end up doing is making all of the clothes contaminated. And even when the rinse cycle comes, the rinse cycle is going to end up contaminated as well. So according to the Shafi'i school, if you have filth on your clothes, you need to wash it outside of the washing machine. The washing machine will not solve this issue. This is how the Shafi'i school works. Usually for this question, and I'm glad you asked it, sister, usually in this situation, I tell people about the ruling from the Maliki school. And I don't like to give rulings from other madhabs, but in cases like this, where your life will be made significantly easier by following the other madhab, I usually say it. In the Maliki school, if you have a small amount of water, it doesn't matter if you poured the water onto the filth or poured the filth onto the water. That doesn't matter in the Maliki school. All that matters is, did the water change? Did the taste, color, or smell of the water change because it came into contact with the najis filth? Okay, so usually the Maliki school will permit you to just throw the clothes into the washing machine, even with the other clothes. And as long as the najasa is gone at the end, then you can conclude that the clothes have been purified. Long story short, go ahead and use the washing machine, but know that if you had something najis in there, it's pure according to the Maliki school and not pure according to the Shafi'i school. Someone asked, does this pertain to all animals and insects or just the ones mentioned? It pertains to any animal where if you pull a leg off of the animal, that animal will not bleed. So it includes flies, mosquitoes, gnats, fruit flies, roaches, ants, spiders, any animal where pulling a leg off doesn't make it bleed. If that type of animal goes into the water and dies in it by itself, not that you threw it in there, but on its own, it went into the water and died there, it doesn't contaminate the water. Just like it doesn't contaminate things that are not water. If you had a bowl of soup and a fly flew into your soup and died in it, it does not contaminate your soup. You just dip that fly deep in your soup and then take it out of your soup and throw it, and then you eat the soup. Okay, the soup is not contaminated. Someone asked about the ashes of the fire. If you burn the poop, if the only thing you were burning was poop, and you hadn't burned anything there before the poop, okay, if it's a situation where all of the ashes that are there could only have been from the poop, then yes, you would say those ashes are najis. Okay, but if there were already ashes there before you put the poop there to burn it, or if you weren't only burning poop, like say you burned some poop and some wood, then in this case, there would be doubt. Okay, there would be doubt if you saw some ashes, there would be doubt whether those ashes are from the poop or from the wood or from the old ashes that were there before. And because of the doubt, you would not say that the ashes you touched were from the poop. Okay, you would not conclude that all of the ashes are najis. Okay, someone asked about cats licking their hands and their feet. Okay, a cat licking will never ever break wudu. Okay, wudu is only broken by 4 things, and a cat licking you is not one of those 4 things. So there's never a case where a cat licking you breaks your wudu. The issue is, will the cat licking you contaminate the spot that got licked such that you need to wash that one spot? The answer is, if you know that the cat's mouth is contaminated and there's no chance that the cat washed its mouth out while you weren't looking, then yes, every place that the cat licks, you need to consider that it's contaminated. So, for example, if you buy the cat food in a can, the moist cat food that's made with meat, okay, that meat is najis. If you see the cat eat that meat, the cat's mouth is najis. If there's no chance that the cat drank from a river or something while you weren't looking, then every place the cat licks, you have to consider to be najis. Okay? That's how it works. That's why it's good to have cats around, but not necessarily limited to just your house. Have a cat that can run off and come back, then you don't need to worry about this. Someone asked, what if you soak the garment to clean it in a bucket of water to clean it and then put it in a washing machine? According to the Shafi'i school, if the garment has something najis on it, meaning it has something like blood or vomit or alcohol on it, then if you put it in a bucket, it made all of the water najis, and therefore every part of the garment that touched the water is now contaminated. Whereas previously, only the spot of alcohol was contaminated. Now every place that the water touched is contaminated. You've made the problem worse if you put it in a bucket to soak. This is the ruling of the Shafi'i school. In the Maliki school, putting it in the bucket is not a problem. And then putting it in the washing machine after it's soaked in the bucket is not a problem. So you can go ahead and do that, and it's fine according to the Malikis. I think that's the last question. So let's say La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Barakallahu feekum. I'll see you next week, inshallah, at the normal time. If any of you were affected by any of the hurricanes that have come by lately, I ask that Allah provide you what you need, grant you strength and patience, and grant you reward, inshallah ta'ala. I'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.